Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to Versus Stars podcast. And my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. This is a very special episode because the amazing David Hewlett is back on the mothership. This time we talk to tech bandits, education, and then we shoot the shit. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Oh, hello, Sir David of Hewlett. Thank you so much for coming to the Versus Stars podcast. I had to do it after you said it.
There's nothing planned in advance. Nothing planned at all in advance. Anything I say before the interview will and can be used against me. I love it. Yeah.
I should have had it all in right. I should have had that text to speech. I'd be like, but remember what you said off air.
Yes. Sir David Hewlett is fine. Yeah. No, David is totally fine, but Sir David Hewlett has a nice ring to it, I must say. Yeah.
So, Sir David, we were talking about Tech Bandit, which I must say is one of the coolest things, I think, of one of the people I got to talk to on these podcasts. So you've been doing it for a while. So what have you learned about Tech Bandit, or how has the idea adapted since you first came up with the idea?
Well, it's funny because it started, it really sort of, it came from a frustration that I had with my kid and the kids that surrounded him, with this kind of this black box mentality of like, a PlayStation breaks, so you throw it out and you get another one. And I was like, what? No, you take it apart. That's what, like, I got in so much trouble taking stuff apart my entire childhood. And I loved it. And I thought I was just a disaster. And the reality is I was learning stuff the whole time. Like, I didn't realize that was education, so I would come home from school. I would find stuff in the garbage and old TV sets and stuff, and electrocute myself, and just have a wonderful time pretending to make things or breaking things or whatever. And I would save up for video game consoles and then take them apart the second day I had them. And it would drive my parents nuts. And I was banned from playing with the television or any of that kind of stuff because I literally took everything apart. I just wanted to see I want to see how it worked. And I think there hasn't been a big push for that. I think a lot of the big companies that build stuff, they don't want you fixing it. They want you getting it serviced by them or buying new stuff. And I think that's really trickled down into education to some extent, where everyone's solution is just to throw it away and buy new stuff. So I just wanted to sort of see if kids had that same innate curiosity that I had as a kid. And sure enough, as soon as you start bringing in old computers, and their first thing is always like, well, what if I break it? I'm like, well, it's already broken, so go nuts. And then then a few people put screwdrivers through screens and stuff, and you go, okay, well, maybe not that nuts. So you have to. So as I went along, I found I had to put a few guardrails on because I just didn't want them hurting themselves too much. But even that, like, just getting an old computer open, sometimes you nick your finger and stuff. And kids were just, it was like, oh my God, that's it, we're going to the nurse. It's like, what? Come on, have a look. It's fine. Put a piece of tape on it. And it's sort of not to toughen them up, but just to sort of, I just think they were so inexperienced in this stuff that I just grew up doing. Anyways, I'm not saying the whole project was about kids hurting themselves. But no, it was about them pulling stuff apart, and it was fun finding old printers. And you just see so much trash, geek trash out there, as I call it, that I could sort of gather up, and I would sort of clean out whatever horrible things might be living in it, just so they didn't find anything alive in there. And then they were so interested in stuff once they pulled it apart, they were like, oh, what could I make with this? That's what I saw happen all the time. Was they'd pull a motor out of a printer and go like, oh, this is a motor. What could you do with a motor? And that was exciting to me because I realized that the whole process of deconstructing these things was a wonderful sort of way into them getting sort of creative and building their own things. Which is sort of in the back of my mind was what I was hoping would happen anyway. So that certainly happened. And also just I just think that when they see adults playing, when they see someone like me who is basically operating at a 14-year-old level of, intellect and stuff anyways, when you see me getting excited about like, oh my God, we pulled up with this printer and what's in this bit and what's in that bit, like, I truly love this stuff. And I think that there's a certain infectious quality to that. I think that kids don't expect to see in grown-ups, especially old gray grown-ups like me. So that was the original sort of impetus for doing this stuff. And then I started looking into, I found that I was working on a documentary about people with disabilities, and they asked me what I was doing, and I mentioned this documentary, and they were fascinated by this assistive technology. So I started bringing assistive technology in, and that was eye-opening because all of a sudden they saw this technology and these, and the physics and the math and all the stuff that they were, just beginning to get into in school, they were seeing it being used to literally change lives, right? So all of a sudden they were sort of empowered by this. So that was fascinating. And then of course there was a teacher strike, and then there was a COVID pandemic, and we moved online, and I thought we were dead in the water. Like we had our first Zoom chat, and it was just awful. It was just like, you could hear them playing in the games in the background. You could have, and so my son actually suggested that we do Twitch. So I was like, Twitch, like, well, I'll never get their attention. Then I thought, well, okay, well, so I don't get their attention. So I literally started live streaming. The kids got excited about the fact that they were on a live stream and would engage when they felt like it. So like one would hear me talk about some biotech and they'd go, oh, that's cool. They would come in and they'd talk about that. Then they go back to their game because they get bored again. And someone else would pop in and go, oh, dinosaurs. I love dinosaurs. So it was just a matter of like, I was just having it out there almost like a radio show. There's just this idiot old guy babbling on about all the stuff he's excited about. And when it spoke to them, they would jump in. And the rest of the time they were just gaming. And I stopped fighting it. Like I stopped taking offense. Of course, video games are more interesting than I am. Like why? Of course, they're more interesting in teaching or learning or anything. I mean, of course, that's the case. They're designed for that. But if they're in a space that they're comfortable in and they're gaming and they're learning things when they feel like it, they also shared stuff. Like I got insights into kids and their perspective on things and what they were looking at online, both fantastic and terrifying. It was amazing. Like I felt like I was like one of the kids for a while there. And that was, and so that was great. Then the pandemic ended and I got worried because I was like, I don't want them online. Like this, now they've got a chance to get out there. They should get out there. So I went back and started working at this, doing some community center stuff with the Tech Bandits, trying to get some kids who are a little tougher than the kids I've been working with these young privileged little things in my neighborhood. And then I went down and started working at the community center, where if someone doesn't like what you're doing, they tell you pretty quick. And again, I was surprised at how they just I think if there's a vulnerability there, like I go in there, I don't know, I'm a high school dropout. I have no faith in anything that I've learned. I am all self-taught. I love learning. I've always loved learning. I've always hated school, and I've hated that whole process. It didn't work for me. And so I think once the kids sort of cotton on to that idea, they usually seem to, respond quite well. So,
So there's a quote that you have on your website. I want to discuss it because I really like the quote. All right. So you say,
I probably stole it.
Okay. Well, you're going to let me know after I say it. Keeping kids of all ages curious, inspiring a lifelong love of learning, and fueling the quest for truth gathered from many perspectives. So the part I'm kind of curious about is the many perspectives part. So can you kind of go into deep dive into that a little bit?
I spent a lot of time working on that because I wanted a mission statement that was clear for myself. Like I'm a little ADHD, or a lot, as the case may be. So I tend to wander, and I need something to help me focus, and at the same time also allow me to be interested in everything. And I think the perspective thing was fascinating to me because I think I spent a lot of time on social media. I'd had a lot of arguments with people, especially during the Trump era, about, my issues with him as an individual. And I started to realize that, I'm not learning anything if I've just decided something. So, I thought it was, there were Republicans. I was a Republican for a long time and just didn't, I was not a fan of Trump. And thus didn't feel that it no longer represented my Republican conservative views on this stuff. But as a result, I found that I was no longer communicating with people who did like him. And I realized, it took a while, but it realized that I wanted that, you have to be open to learn stuff. I don't need to be convinced, and I don't want to convince other people about politics. Politics doesn't interest me particularly at all. What I was interested in is people. I think that, if we categorize ourselves as various different parties or beliefs or whatever, there's no talking points. It's just outrage and anger and frustration. And so my hope was that that's what sort of elicited this idea of like, I wanted to have a space where I'm not talking about, I don't want to talk to, crazy fascists and things, but at the same time, I would like to know that this is about science. Like this is about learning stuff, and that my perspective is my own perspective, is my own little focus, is my own little tunnel vision that I have, that we all have. And if we only want to look in that area where we shine our own little spotlights, then we don't learn anything. So that was my thing. I got a lot of flack for saying that I was a racist, sexist, homophobic, ableist.
Wait, for being Republican or for being?
I'm like, I stated that, and it was as a very sort of, it was very sort of snowflakey thing to say,
right.
or whatever, very woke thing to say. And my point was just that if I don't operate from that perspective, I don't learn anything, right? Like if I just assume that I'm right, then I'm not learning anything from anybody with a different background. So the whole point of this thing was to try to, I think it's important not to just be taught something and learn it, and that's it, and I think that's how a lot of my schooling was, that this is the way it was. This is what the book says. That's it. The whole point is you want to question that all the time, and constantly question, why does this work? Why does this not work? My best friend at my wedding said I was the best complainer that he's ever met, because my frustration is that things can be better.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I just feel like that was part of it. It was basically, I'm not giving Trump credit for it, but it was at a time when I felt like we were all splitting off into our own little belief systems, whether that be political or religious or whatever. I mean, I just want to figure out how to be respectful, but also not convinced. If that makes sense.
So when you're thinking about like school, for those who do not know, even though I've mentioned probably a few times, I'm a teacher, special ed teacher, whatever now.
Yeah.
An educator on any or some shape. Do you think school lost its way by being afraid of questions?
Absolutely. In fact, I think there is a learned helplessness that's come with all of this, where I feel like people don't want to discuss difficult topics. We can't talk about the Second World War because there's the whole Jewish, Auschwitz side of stuff, which could be disturbing for people. But that's history. If we don't talk about it, we have to talk about this stuff. We have to, in order to learn things, we need to look into our past. It's the best way to see the future is to look to the past. Learning is not a comfortable process. You know what I mean? And I feel like the educational system is trying to push people whenever there's something that might be difficult. There's this, oh, well, then take a break and walk away. And it's like, I don't think that's right. Like, I think if learning was easy, then it wouldn't stick. You can sit there and watch hours and hours of YouTube videos. You're not going to remember any of it. If you're actually doing something and screwing it up and gluing your hands together using your crazy glue like I do all the time, I think if you're not making mistakes and failing, you're not learning anything. And I feel that there's a tendency to I don't want to say coddling the children, but I think there's a tendency to think that they're not resilient enough to deal with this stuff. These kids are watching all of this stuff online. They're watching stuff. Yeah.
All right. So my disagreement is that I don't think the issue is questions from the kids. I think it's the teachers who are afraid of questions.
Yes.
When I...
But the kids pick up on that, though. And then they start regurgitating that same belief, right?
Well. See, there was a short story. I can't remember the name of the short story off the top of my head, but I remember a conversation I had with another teacher. They entered the classroom. I can't remember what reason, but they had me while I was teaching a class on the short story. And we were talking about the theme. My theme of the short story was question everything. And the kids are like, question the adults. I said, you especially question the adults. Question me. You better be questioning me when I'm teaching you. You better ask, just assume that I'm telling you the right thing. Look it up. Make sure I'm right. And the teacher next to me was like, you better be careful of that. You don't want them to start, question everything you're doing. It's like, of course I do. Every goddamn thing. They should go through life questioning everything that they're told.
Absolutely.
By an adult. And I think
in a respectful way, but
right. Yeah. But, and I think the concern is that as the teacher is
is the question. Do I want to be questioned by my students because I may not have the answer for them? So I think the teachers are trying to teach, don't ask me the question, because what if I don't have the answer? And teachers are way type A personalities. Everything has to be right. Everything has to be the way, within the proper, sequence of events.
So then approach it in that Socratic way where, like, you can ask the questions, and some of the questions you don't know the answers to. You know what I mean? And Socrates came off pretty good. Like, he looked pretty good from an intelligence standpoint, and all he did was ask questions. I think there's also a tendency for us to want to do things. Like, it's very easy. I call it, I don't know what the term is, but because I don't have the terminology for it, but I used to call it like hands in pocket teaching, where you just you gotta just put your hands in your pocket and don't try to fix what they're doing, because what they're doing is because if they don't learn, I was amazed at how many times people would say, like, this didn't work, what do I do?
Right.
I'm like, I don't know, what do we do? I don't know, that really, it didn't work. You know what I mean? Like, if you go like, well, here, give me the damn screwdriver, well, you got the wrong screwdriver, whatever, like, they don't learn anything.
Right.
And I think you're right. The issue obviously comes down to whoever's in charge. I think there is a tendency, there's an arrogance, I think, to being an adult, where you think you know better. But the reality is, and I catch myself on this all the time, in a way, I'm very fortunate, because I truly don't know anything. Like, I don't have the background. I don't have the educational background for any of this stuff. So I second guess everything that I say or do. I would never claim to be a teacher. I would happily call myself a student, because I think that's my entire life is about that. My hope is that, and I've got great joy out of it. So my hope is that same joy can be picked up by a few of these kids, and that they will have that for the rest of their lives. I mean, if you could inspire a love of learning early on, I can't imagine a better gift. I mean, that'll take you, the places that'll take you is extraordinary. And yes, I think there is a tendency to, teaching is a job. I mean, there are going to be days that you don't want people questioning what you're doing. There are curriculum requirements. There are testing requirements. There's all these stupid infrastructural things boring administrative stuff that you're going to have to deal with that I don't have to deal with. So I've got the freedom to be like, the clown who comes in and goofs around, and kids go, oh my God, I wish we could do that every day. I was like, yeah, you get me every day, you'd soon learn. It's not, I'm also going to go like, shut up, I'm right. I mean, it's gonna, so I guess that's part of it. But again, that's the perspective thing. That's the seeing things from all different angles. Was like, yeah, ask the teacher why they know this. And often, like, I'm one of those irritating people who, when someone uses a word I don't understand, I'll ask them what it means. And people sometimes get offended because they think I'm testing them. I'm not testing them. I've heard the word before. I know kind of what it means, but I want the specifics, because if they could explain the specifics of the word to me, I have a better understanding of what they're saying.
Well, see, the other thing is too, I think, because as a teacher, I've had this experience, and I probably have used it as a dark secret of among teachers. We don't often know. You know what I'm saying? Like we're wrong so freaking often about things, or we're not exactly like if you mention like, what does this word mean? I might be like, I know what it means, but like, can I, am I always right? And I think teachers are deeply afraid of looking wrong in front of students or in front of another staff member, because it's this whole thing where everyone has a secret. And a few times I've asked teachers, like, does it sometimes feel like you know less than you should about what you're? It's like, and you get them like privately to be like, yeah. I'm like, I often sometimes like feel like I don't know enough about my subject. I'm like,
it's
I feel that way too.
Syndrome. We all have it.
Right. And I think teachers are deeply afraid of a kid asking them a question and then going, I don't really know.
But that's why, if you can come at it from a point of, and I guess it is very Socratic. Now that I mention it, it's funny. I mean, it really is that. Is that if you come from a point of it, like, explain it to me, like, I for years tried to get my kid into all the stuff that I thought was important for my kid to get into, and all of a sudden he's into soccer, and I'm like, what the hell? Sport? I don't do sports. What do I? But he's teaching me about soccer now, and I think he's probably learning more, and he's also gaining an understanding of how to speak to people and how to explain stuff. He gets frustrated. I'm like, That's not on me. That's on you. I'm an idiot. You have to explain to me. I think there's, could you imagine how cool it would be to go into school and there's like a list on the side of the blackboard or whatever the hell they're using now. It's been a while since I've been in school.
Whiteboards.
But whiteboards. There you go. There's a whiteboard with a list of things, David got wrong. You know what I mean? And then you got a name beside it. Oh, Joe found out that David is wrong about the cycles of the moon. Well, what are the cycles of the moon? That's gonna click with people, And how much better a teacher are you if you just own up to that stuff? And again, easy for me to say, not my job, but
Well, I will say, once again, I don't tend to my current school, but when I was previously an actual gen ed teacher, it was my classroom. Every year I started off with a slide about who I was, and it always ended with 2 different slides. One slide was why we are teaching English. I think kids should know that is why, other than because I want you to, because it's on your grade. I give a reason of why English is important. And then the second slide is it's okay to be wrong. And I start off with, I am wrong all the time. You will catch me being wrong, and you need to tell me when I'm wrong, but you'll be wrong too. And that's why you're here. And that's kind of like the whole thing. Because I really do think that's the most important thing to talk about.
Failure. People have to learn how to fail. I think there's a tendency, and I'm victim of this myself all the time, where I feel useless. I give up on stuff. I couldn't fix that. I couldn't do this. Well, the reality is, of course you can, because you stopped. You know what I mean? Like it's like acting. You never stop. I'm never going to stop being an actor until I stop being an actor. You know what I mean? Like, I may not be acting right now, but I'm still, I'm still an actor. Like, I mean, I feel like I'm very, very worried that there are responses to all of the kids. Like, it's almost, we've like formalized stuff so much, and this need to funnel as many kids as possible through as much of the curriculum as is necessary. I get in a lot of trouble for this because I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, I'm not a teacher. I don't know curriculum. I just know the frustration I see in the kids that I was talking to. Kids would say they hate learning. And I was like, what are you talking about? How did you learn how to play the video game? Well, that's different. I was like, well, that's learning, isn't it? I mean, like, it's like, I'm just constantly looking for things, like ways. Again, are there ways that the kids can tell me what they're interested in, that I can find connections to things that are interesting to me?
Yeah, I agree. I think when the problems, I think, with education now, and I probably have to be a little careful about how I walk around this as someone who's actually a teacher right now, is that good intentions are ruining school on some level. They're so invested in how much quantity we can shove into their heads in a year in a very strict curriculum that you don't have time for quality. Because the thing is, like, because I mean, just schools are like, you got 5 minutes to do this part of the class, and you got 10 minutes on that, and then you got 5 minutes to talk. It's like, well, sometimes the kids are gonna get interested in something, and you gotta let them talk, even if it's slightly off subject. Let them talk. This is when they're finally interested in something, and it's part of the conversation when they're interested in. But unfortunately, with school and how much you got to stresses on hitting your curriculum goals. Sorry, that was 5 minutes, man. We got to move on. We gotta get to the next thing.
And you have to.
Right.
I mean, absolutely. So it's fine. I'm finding that line has got to be impossible. Like, this is the other thing. I mean, you talk about seeing things from different perspectives. I'm not a scientist, but I play one on TV. I'm not a scientist, so I don't have to be right. I can pontificate about stuff. I can regurgitate stuff I've read on the internet. I hope, and I should probably start writing this in things and I should start saying this too. The reality is, I don't know. Look it up. Like, because I'm reading what I read. I'm interested in what I'm interested in. I'm taking my own take on these things. I don't have any responsibility with it. And I think that's the problem now. As you talk about, all the kids want to be influencers and rappers and such. Great. Why not? Fantastic. There'd be nothing wrong with a bunch of great YouTubers, unless they're all doing exactly the same thing, which a lot of them are. But the problem is that it's much harder to create smart, intelligent, well-researched content. So it can take months, years to provide that. It takes seconds for someone to voice their opinion, or give their 2 cents version of whatever the scientific paper is that I've attempted to read. You know what I mean? So I've set my parameters very, very, very wide, in that I'm just saying, like, all I want to do is throw a bunch of stuff at people in the hopes that they will find something of interest and a rabbit hole that they want to go down. I mean, that happened with me with film and TV. I went from wanting to be a Time Lord to realizing I could pretend to be a Time Lord for a living. And then all of a sudden I was fascinated and willing to learn entire books of Shakespeare. I was willing to watch interminable movies. I was willing to learn about cameras and lighting and get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go and film with my friends. I mean, the things I was willing to do to get to become a part of this industry that I just absolutely adore was, it was basically endless. It was, bottomless.
Well, like I said, talk about one of the things that I think is really cool. And if our listeners don't know, a Tech Bandit, you have a website and you have these emails, or I don't know if you call them email or more like newsletters.
The email of awesomeness.
Yes, where you can.
I can't even call it a newsletter because it doesn't even. I feel guilty calling it a newsletter. Yeah.
Well, it's a you sign up for it. For those of you who are listening, you put in your email and you get these emails, and they're incredible. I'm not just kissing your ass because you're my guest. They are incredible emails. They are eclectic. You talk about multiple topics. There was the most recent one. There's the robot champ making the champ. Then you have tardigrades.
More chunky. That's right.
And you got tardigrades, which are incredible. You talk about AIs. You talked about that create new drugs. You have a way that you can make like man-made insulin or make the cell make insulin or something along those lines.
I think there's coaxing yeast into making insulin, wasn't it? Or some bacteria. Yeah.
It's just fascinating, and it's like I said, it's eclectic. There's a lot of different topics. So how are you pulling these things together? When are you deciding to talk about something? Where do you get the information from? And when do you think it's ready to actually put it out there?
That's a tough one. I mean, writing is one of those things I don't think it's ever finished. It's sort of abandoned. You know what I mean? You just sort of eventually go like, okay, you know what? There's some spelling mistakes. I'm sure I've missed something. It's going out. Because I can obsess on this stuff. It's very kind of you, to think that there's some kind of method to the madness, but it's very in keeping with my ADHD approach to life. And what I discovered was I wanted a way to do something with this lack of focus that I have. I am fascinated by everything. I am maddening to be around. But as a result, I feel that the newsletter of Awesomeness was just things I thought were cool. I mean, generally relating to science and technology. I do like it when I can speak to one of our Tech Bandits kids who, when I met him, actually, he was one of the impetuses for this whole Tech Bandits thing. Was he came to our house and accused my son of being a liar because he'd said that my son was and I was like, oh God, what has he done? What's he said? I would immediately assume my poor kid is the one responsible. He says, you're building a gaming computer. And I was like, oh God, yeah. No, we're in the basement right now. So he came down and he saw it and it was like, oh my God. It's like his mind was blown. The kid's like now 16 years old. I now email him to ask him about what computers I should buy because he knows far more than I ever will about this stuff. He does a thing called cap modding, which I've never even heard of, where he's taking capacitors and soldering them onto old GPUs to beat, speed records on these things, overclocking these things. I mean, and one of the things he's doing as well is this FIRST Robotics stuff. Where he's not just 3D printing parts, he's designing the parts in Onshape and then 3D printing them and attaching them to these robots that are now competing in FIRST Robotics. So, again, I'm not going to take responsibility for all of that, but he did all the work, and his parents are fantastic too. His parents are geniuses as well. But there was a little spark of inspiration there that I think if he just bought a PC and played video games, he would only be playing video games. You know what I mean? But the fact that he learned that you could build one and that there were things to know about that, and it spoke to his type of learning, his type of, he's got that wonderfully slightly obsessive quality to him, a meticulous quality. And it just worked for him. So it's just nice to be able to throw some Tech Bandit stuff in there as well. Also, I just I found that I'm spending a lot of time on social media. I found that because outrage has been weaponized or monetized, probably a better term. Now I started to, instead of looking for things on social media, I would just sign up to newsletters, like a newsletter from MIT, newsletter from John Hopkins, a newsletter from Genetics or Nature magazine, all these, National Geographic, all Wired is a great one too. And I would just find stories that I thought were interesting, and in a bid to try to learn them better myself and to understand what was going on, having to write them down in a way that is understandable to other people and to condense them is a great way to learn stuff. It's like writing notes, and I also get to share those as well. So it's sort of a very selfish pursuit, but at the same time, I just felt like there's a better connection to, like, I'll get an email from someone saying, from an email, so I'll send out the email of awesomeness to mailing lists and stuff, and then I'll get an actual email back, and someone goes like, "Oh my God, my dad just had that treatment," or "Oh my God, I didn't know about this," or that is so much more rewarding than like a thumbs up, a heart, like whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's that quest for real connection there, and again, and getting other people's perspectives, so people can email and say like, "Dude, you are so off base on that. Like, that's your own little world. You didn't realize this, and this." I'm like, "No, I didn't. Great, I learned something. I'm wrong."
So I read one of your newsletters, and it was interesting, and I'm not sure what it means. So I'm gonna decided, since you're kind of now my Bill Nye guy on my podcast, apparently.
Okay,
congratulations. Right. I'm gonna ask you about it because you wrote it. So, anyways, so you discuss a proof of concept, non-toxic, high resolution lithographic method to attach nanomaterials to living tissue. What in the world are you talking about?
So the idea, again, which was fascinating to me. I saw the picture. That's what spoke to me. I was like, "Oh, look, gold dots on something." And they haven't just sort of blinged out a cell. They've taken a mouse brain cell, and they've managed to attach these tiny little nano-size gold particles onto the cell. And the hope is that this, because of the proof of concept, the hope is that this is going to allow us to have in vitro antennas or sensors, or we're basically bridging the gap between the organic and the electrical now. So, and gold is just amazing. I didn't know this, and again, this is what sort of started the whole tangent on that. So, first off, lithography, like one of the oldest ways of printing, known to man. Like, it goes back to like sheet music, not known to man, but certainly known to me. It goes back to like sheet music back in like the 1700s, and it's basically just like grease and ink and water, and you just, where the grease is, the ink won't stick, and vice versa, or whatever version of that you want to do. And that's how they would do this incredibly detailed reproductions, because you literally see all of the little bits and pieces of the artist's work in these prints. And they've basically done the same thing, but on a living cell. So they've got very good at making, transistors and circuit boards incredibly small. But in order to do that, there's all these horrific chemicals and crushing pressures and just generally it'll kill humans, let alone human cells. So this, being able to do this is extraordinary, and they've done it with a series of basically like 3D printing. Inkjet printing. So they fire this ink in tiny microscopic layer onto this glass plate that allows them to get these little gold dots. They then apply something to take it off the glass, allow it to be removed from the glass. They then embed it in a kind of a gel that then can adhere to a cell. They then wash away the gel, and these little nanodots stick to the cell. And it's just the most painstakingly complicated procedure. I was just sort of fascinated by it. But something else they're doing with gold is, because gold is so, that's why we have gold earrings and things, is because they tend to not, they're not reactive. They don't, they generally don't get infected. That's why people wear gold a lot. Gold is, is pretty good at that. So what they're able to do now is they've taken these little tiny nanoparticles of gold. They've attached like biomaterial that will then sort of go through the body and attach itself to whatever the counter to this biomaterial is, often in cancer cells. So they say like, okay, we're looking for this type of cell. What will stick to that kind of cell? Oh, this kind of protein will do that. So they attach it to gold, put it through the body, attaches to a cell. They then fire a laser at it like a freaking James Bond movie, and it nukes the gold. The gold heats up and kills the cells that are attached to it, which are cancer cells.
Huh.
And what I loved about this story as well was that they talked about the material cost of this procedure is about that of a wedding ring, which I just thought a gold wedding ring. It's just like
Right.
Yeah. So it's just these weird little connections that the story sort of almost writes itself, because you follow my crazy rabbit brain down whatever paths it chooses. And eventually I often start with a huge long diatribe that then gets cut down to a few lines, because it doesn't make sense. But and then you find your story that way. And it's a slightly longer procedure than it probably should be. But the weird thing is this: the newsletters that I read are generally fairly point form. You get like a heading, you get a little blurb about it, and then if I'm excited about that, I will follow the link and pursue it that way. So in a way, that's probably what I should be doing, but it's just not how I operate. Like, I feel like there are better people, better equipped to do that. All I can do is add my own personality to this stuff. And I think that it sort of humanizes some of this really crazy, wild tech. And again, I hope in a way, a little bit of infectious curiosity on this stuff that maybe people will take note. And I'm glad, I'm fascinated that you're reading it, because I in a dream world, I would love this to be a resource for teachers, even if it's just to go like, oh, well, I got to mention that to the kids. Because my son, it's almost mimics what my son does. He'll come running home from school one day and be like, did you know that gravity's not a force? And I'm like, what? Shut up. Things fall all the time. You're lying. And we look it up, and sure enough, it's we're actually in motion, and there's a whole, oh God, that is a world of physics that just hurts. But again, the idea is that, you throw this stuff out there and you just never know. Someone might be interested in some aspect of it,
Well, I mean, what occurred to me was that human ingenuity is freaking incredible.
Oh my, that's amazing.
I mean,
and stupidity. Same time.
True.
At the same time. Yeah.
It's just fun because, like, as you're talking about what it is, the amount of steps that you had to invent to make something like that a real thing is incredible. I mean, just all those little tiny steps that you think to yourself that are just, they don't exist organically. Isn't like, if you put a piece of string in a certain way and you put something in that string, like a loop, you tie it off, that's a necklace. I mean, you can say, like, I can see the connection. That makes sense. Or you hit two rocks together and it sparks, and then you can make a fire. It's like, okay, I can see how that connects. But the lithograph and the gold, and then it does that thing that you, it's like, what the, the amount of creativity it takes to get there.
But couldn't you see, like, I mean, how much I spent hours playing with detergent and oil and water? I mean, like, I was supposed to be doing the dishes, admittedly, but like, that's the kind of stuff. Like, I think it's play. Like, I think I like, people think it's science. It's just playing. Like, this is what's so amazing to me, is that I think that's what I love about this stuff, is I do see how they come up with this stuff. They come up with it by going like, what's that? It's about questioning everything. It's about going like, well, what if you did this? And most of the times they're the stupidest ideas ever, but certainly in my case, but every so often you hit on something. And I just think there's also a real value to trying to find a simple way. In a way, my job as an actor has been to take incredibly complex scientific sci-fi technobabble and make it enjoyable and understanding to people. I feel like I'm just doing the same thing, only with real science and technobabble at this point. You know what I mean?
No, and like I said, that's why I really enjoyed the article. One of the things, as we mentioned a little bit offline, I'm going to mention and bring it up again. The coincidence there where you discuss AI in one of your Twitch episodes. So if you're listening, subscribe to this Twitch. At the same time, where my professional development classes as a teacher had a lesson on AI entering the classroom, a little more ominous on my end of things, depending on how you took it. So I thought that was very interesting. So
It's a lot of industries are in the same situation though. Like, I mean, as you can see, like we're on strike right now. I
yeah.
mean, writers and actors, it's the same issue. I mean, AI is playing it is playing in their sandpit as well. I think I've been saying to everyone they should do an AI audit. Everyone should do an AI audit of their lives. How can you use this new technology to be better at what you do? Because otherwise, I think it's going to replace you. And I mean, that applies to actors, to writers, teachers, students. I mean, I can't, it's hard to think of an area that isn't going to be affected by this, and how important it is to work on our human connections with each other, because that's the only thing AI can't do right now.
Well, I think one thing that was kind of interesting during they mentioned it during the PD, and it's worth looking into, is they use the analogy of AI entering our lives and the cell phone entering our life. Now they said because of the cell phone, the access to the cell phone, your brain has foregone a few skills that it used to have normally because we have it on a cell phone now. Certain ability to memorize certain things, but certain ability to.
I worry about memory because I just look everything up now. Yeah.
Right. And like how to read a map is gone because a phone does it for us now. A few other things that where
luckily I sucked at that anyways. So
I never could read the map. That's why I used to be so afraid of driving. Now
oh my God.
It's
taken a whole anxiety out of my life. All of a sudden, I've got like a sexy British voice telling me where to go. It's fantastic, and it's not my wife.
Well, I just remember the terror of driving someplace I didn't know, especially at night, while holding the map in one hand. I wrote the direction and trying to like figure out where the hell I'm going, and then realizing I missed my stop of what I wrote down, and then realizing on some level I'm fucked for who knows how long.
And you didn't have a phone to call for help. I mean,
exactly.
It's like, now we sound so old, but yeah, I think there's definitely pluses to this stuff. But as you say, it's like the calculator showing up in high school.
Right.
It was always like, oh, you can't bring that into math class. It's like, really? Because you don't understand. If you don't know what to punch into it,
right,
it's useless to you anyways.
So the question with AI now becomes, when you integrate it, what are you integrating out of it?
I mean, look, this is stuff that people are, much smarter than I am are struggling with. But I think that that what I'm seeing from it is I'm seeing sort of two responses. I'm seeing this absolute like crypto bro like approach to like, oh my God, it's everything, and then I see this absolute phobia, this absolute fear, this techno almost Luddite burn and smash the looms kind of approach to it as well. And I'm definitely more crypto bro for sure. Like I am a sci-fi science nerd. I believe technology is going to save us. I really do. Like I think it's the only thing that can save us at this point, because we're not doing it. Like I think we've got to come up with solutions to solve the issues that there's so many issues that we have. So I do believe it's going to be a savior to some extent. But at the same time, again, perspective, I need to look at it from other people's perspectives as well, because obviously it's going to have a negative impact as well, as these technologies do. What's weird is there's a lot of these technologies, when they put people out of work, they create other jobs. Like that's the like, I mean, the number of new AI startup companies is extraordinary. I got friends doing t-shirt companies that never would have done that a week ago, like literally a week ago. But the technologies are there that allow them to do that. I have one of my best friends is Lance, who he can't move. And so it opens up a world of possibilities for someone like that. You know what I mean? So I'm obviously focused on the positive, but when it comes to the educational side of stuff, I think what most scares people is that it's messing with the system we've created, which we know doesn't work anyways. So we know that this whole standardized approach to education, there's nothing standard about education. Everyone learns differently. Everyone has different interests. In an ideal world, everyone would have an IEP as as an independent educational program. Ideally, that is the way people should be educated. Because there are some people who just can't sit in a classroom. There's some people who, as soon as you tell them to do something, they do the opposite. I am that person. Both of those people, in fact. So I was miserable in school. But the idea that AI could be used to bounce ideas off, I'm fascinated to see what's going to happen with Khan Academy, because Khan Academy is this fantastic resource online for learning stuff. They have embraced AI. They're about to launch a new I don't know whether it's a project or part of project where they are tailoring as machine learning models to work with students to help educate them so they can get that one-on-one training that is impossible to do with humans because there aren't enough people. Right. But you still, and that to me, that means that could free up teachers to actually make connections with their students instead of yelling at them for doing, to do stuff. I mean, I've always thought that with school, anything that the kids could be doing at home, they should be doing at home. The stuff that you need to be doing at school is the stuff that they can't do at home. They shouldn't be sitting there watching movies together. That's a waste of freaking, what they can watch YouTube at home. You should be discussing the YouTube videos or discussing them while you're watching them or whatever. I mean, there's a collective knowledge of the human race available to people. Most of it on, if not all of it on YouTube at this point. Like we don't have to have the best math teacher in our local school. We just need access to the best math teacher on YouTube. And I feel like, I think we're still struggling with that as a because again, why do we have bad math teachers? Why do we assume that we have to have local teachers teaching kids this stuff? Why can't they, if you're just going to stand in front of a class and teach them, you might as well show them a video, an entertaining video about about the math product you're working on. So, obviously hitting on all the problems.
Well, I mean, one interesting thing about my job is that they have pushed me into taking another class at Rowan College.
Right.
For basically it's
do they get commissions on this or something? Is that
oh, it feels that way. The government at the very least is taking a bit of a cut. But basically it's basically on testing, standardized tests and things of that made for special education. And the professor, for better or worse, gave an interesting piece of information. The level of reading efficiency among students has not changed in over 30 years.
Wow.
Now, when you think about Race to the Top, No Child Left Behind, some of these other programs to try to improve teaching, and all this movements and how to become better teachers and everything else, if we put all that work and we still have not made any progress in 30 years, what's the problem? I mean, we're obviously putting a lot of attention towards being better schools. We changed curriculum, we changed accountability, we changed so many different aspects. Why hasn't the number not budged?
No, that is worrying. I mean, and this is part of the problem though, as well, is I think that if we had a better educated population, they could read those stats and understand what that means. You know what I mean? I mean, it's part of the problem is that there's that, if you want to get conspiratorial on this stuff, you could say that, the man doesn't want us to get smarter. I mean, I don't think that's the case. I think it's more of a headless blunder than a specific attempt to make people dumb. But I do worry that the more the education falters, the less equipped we are going to be to educate our future generations, right? I mean, the teachers are not going to be as good now if they didn't get a good education themselves. I mean, we had a math teacher who had to go back to math class because it was they discovered that he didn't know the math. Like it was, that's who's teaching our kids math. Right. I think a lot of this stuff as well is our organizations and structures, both governmental and organizational and obviously private, that don't want to change. You know what I mean? Like, this is the way it is. This is the way it has always been. I remember writing an essay on my Commodore 64 when I was a kid, and I was so proud, and I brought it to school, and they said that's cheating, and maybe go home and write it out by hand because they thought the computer had written it for me. Right? So
how do they think the computer could pull that off?
Well, this is it. They just didn't understand. They're like, well, that's cheating. You just typed it out. And it's like, what do you mean just typed it out? It's like, I freaking typed it out. But no, that was not, again, there was a lack of understanding of the technology. And I think that, for example, I don't know if this is true or not, but my son is saying that at his school right now, they're making them write everything by hand to stop them from using ChatGPT because they have no way of catching it. I would argue that, if you want to find out whether something's read by being created by AI, I'm sure there are ways of doing it. There are technologies that can yeah.
Well, they're talking about. I will also say if you're okay, here's the thing: if you have a teacher that can't figure out if it's real or a chatbot doing it, you're a shitty teacher. One thing as an English teacher I've learned.
Or you got very intelligent students, maybe.
Right. Well, one thing I learned as a teacher is that every writer is like a fingerprint. The writing is like their fingerprint. If you can't tell the difference between what a chat is or your student's doing, you're either not paying close enough attention, you're just lazy, or you really don't understand writing. Because every kid, especially unless I mean, I think when they were at the class just said it's a problem at the graduate level, because at the graduate level it becomes so formal that it becomes all the personality is pulled out of it and it's just formal words.
Right.
But at the junior high school, you can see, you can tell the right. I mean, I've caught kids cheating because I know the rhythm well enough to know it was the parent, who wrote it. Because things you can see a change in how the sentence structure works. You can tell. I mean, the chatbot isn't smart enough yet to totally sound like a person. It always sounds smarter than the student at this point.
Right. But think about it. I mean, could that be, this could elevate the quality of the work of the students if they're, if they learn to use ChatGPT and understand what is being put down. Who cares if they wrote it or not? If they're learning in the process of doing it, I guess my point with the AI stuff is that I think that, we can spend all of our energy trying to catch kids using it for the wrong reasons, or wouldn't it be better just to use the energy to figure out how to use it as part of the teaching process? I mean, because the fact is the teachers can use this as well. I mean, writers could use it. I mean, I think that as much as people are against this stuff, when the word processor first came out, everyone was like, oh my God, now everyone's going to write a book. It's like, well, yeah, everyone can write a book, but everyone can write a bad book. Can everyone write a good book? AI is only going to be, well, I was going to say only as good as the person who uses it. I mean, I liken it to like composing as opposed to playing an instrument. Like, I feel like AI allows you to conduct an orchestra as opposed to have to focus on one specific instrument. And I think that we need to use it that way. We need to use it in a way that opens up possibilities for us rather than, just makes us obsolete.
So obviously Tech Bandits, on your website, which our listeners are going to sign on to the email. How can they help Tech Bandits?
Well, yeah, any help. Well, first off, come by and join us. I try to do at least one live stream a week over on Twitch. And I have no idea what the URL is, but I'm sure we can throw that in the notes or something. But yeah, so I do once a week on that. It would just be great. Just come by, see if you like what we're doing. And then, if you're interested, then definitely sign up at techbandits.org. There's the email of awesomeness that you can sign up for. That's just it. Again, it's just fun. I'm going to start one of my new projects is I think I'm going to start recording them as well, because I realize all of my talk about assistive tech and stuff. I even able-bodied, an Abe, as Lance would call me, an Abe. I much prefer to be able to it would be great to be able to walk the dog and listen to a podcast. Maybe not a podcast is too fancy a word, but the idea of having it, in an audible version would be great. So I thought I'd try to do that.
There's also a place to donate. So what's the donations going to when they donate?
Yes. I mean, basically it's just to help fuel the adventures. I like to be able to sort of jump in and help out if I can with projects the kids are working on, or projects that I think kids might get interested in, and just basically just to fund the adventures. Of course, now that there's a strike on as well, it might actually help also feed me as well, which is good, because you don't like me hungry. Hungry Hewlett is not a hungry Hewlett. Terrible situation. Yeah, so it's basically just allows me to sign up for some of the paid newsletters, and I like to have a Adobe Creative account, so that if the kids do want to do some editing or whatever, they can do that. And also just like I say, it's basically pay me to have fun. That's the joy.
So what's next for you?
That's a good question. I mean, we were talking about this. Like, I feel like the industry is in a really tough spot right now. I mean, we've got a strike going on that's probably going to move into the video game world as well now, with the performers in the video games. And I am very concerned that we've got institutions that are old and antiquated that may not have the leverage they need to get what they want in this industry. I mean, the industry's changed considerably since I started. It is, it's important that we have these organizations and unions to help people not be sort of used and abused. It's an industry that's very, very good at that. So it's important to sort of stand up for people's rights but I am concerned that we are dealing with corporations that don't care about movies. They care about numbers. And if they go down that road too far, we are only going to be watching short form social media content because that is what is incredibly, talking about value for money. People are doing it for free. They're putting up free content online. Why the hell are we paying hundreds of millions of dollars to make movies? So I think I fear that the film and TV industry is moving towards theater, where we're going to have very, very big production on Broadway productions, and then we're going to have lots of little tiny ones that are sort of labors of love. And as a result, it means that even less people are earning a living doing it. So it'll be curious to see how it shakes down. I sort of joke that I'm on the side of robots and AI because I feel like, if the technologies are there to do these jobs better or more efficiently than us, then we need to pivot. And so I'm sort of in a mode where I feel like I'm pivoting at this point. You know what I mean? I think there's always going to be a place for writers and performers and storytellers. I think there's always going to be some kind of work for that. The question is, what is that work? What is that work worth? I should try. I'm obviously not the writing part. And where do we find a sort of an even ground for this stuff? Because where people can make money and people can earn money and also do what they what they like to do. But I think that my frustration is I feel like the industry still thinks that it's in the 1970s and has a huge impact on society. Yes, it does, a massive impact, but it's not as big as gaming and social media or music for that matter, and look what's happened in the music industry. At least with the music industry, the songs get played over and over and over again. Movies, you got one shot. If it's not brilliant, no one's watching it again. And a lot of the stuff coming out of the big studios is not that brilliant. I mean, a lot of that stuff might as well have been written by AI because the stories are, a joke anyways. So yeah, it's to a very long answer to your question is that I'm thinking about, where is the Hewlett in all of this? Where am I? I'm kind of excited about the idea that maybe there's something else I could be doing. Maybe maybe I can do some, work on some of this AI stuff. Maybe I can work on some of this. I love the generated art stuff. It's fantastic. So this was my wrap up. Well done. Longer than the first part.
No, thank you so much, Sir David, for coming on the show. It was an absolute pleasure.
Indeed. Yes, I think we should have heard the Sir David a little bit more, but yeah, it's always a pleasure, man. It's just it's great to talk to you, and I'm my hat's off to you on the education side of stuff, because you've got a much tougher job than any of us actors do. That's for sure.
Well, I do greatly appreciate it. Like you said, you can come on anytime you want. The door is always open.
Keep bugging me. I'm happy to. Yeah, let me. Let's make this a regular thing. We'll check in on the state of technology every so often.
I will totally do that. But I will actually hold you to that. So you gotta be careful. You said
no, please. I mean, that's it's great. I mean, look, it's one of those things that the way I do it is I figure, like, if I'm free, great. If I'm not, I'm not. And and I'll certainly let you know either way. So,
well,
yeah, pleasure, man. Enjoy.